Welcome to a story of friendship, betrayal, and unexpected desires. At the heart of ordinary life, a secret unfolds that threatens to destroy bonds and question everything we know about loyalty. Follow us as we dive into a world where the lines between right and wrong blur, and the consequences of one decision reverberate forever. How the hell did this? Chapter 1. Brett leaned against the bar, swirling the whiskey in his glass and gazing intently into it. His buddy, Randy, settled on a stool to his left. They'd been sitting there since they got home from work, just talking and watching sports on the big screen TV. It was a normal Thursday night. Brett's wife, Pat, was at yoga on Thursday night, so instead of going home to an empty house, Brett went to the bar and stayed there until 9 p.m., meaning he got home about the same time Pat did. Brett set the glass of scotch on the bar and tilted his head to look at Randy. "We've been best friends for a long time." Randy, caught off guard by this comment, threw a perplexed look at Brett. "Yes, ever since you put our third-grade teacher in the hospital with a dart made from a pin and a Bic pen tube, and I took the blame." Brett grinned. Randy was Brett's best friend. They had known each other since elementary school. As kids, they lived only a few houses away from each other and were inseparable. They did everything together. They played sports together. They went to college and lived in the same room. They dated together. Brett was clearly troubled about something tonight. Randy found Brett at the bar. Brett usually came in late. Randy knew right away that something was wrong, especially when he found out that Brett was already 3 drinks ahead of him. And not just any beer. Brett was drinking a double scotch on the rocks. He had overtaken Randy in an hour and was now 3 doubles ahead of him. The alcohol was working its magic. With each passing day, Brett became more and more relaxed. Listening to Randy, he quickly realized that things were not so rosy at Brett's house. "This fool spends me from house to house. I got a credit card bill this month, and she's blowing it all off again. When I talk about it, she just tells me to work harder." Randy wanted to say something, but was afraid what he said would offend his friend. He held back his words and thoughts as Brett continued. "I think she's playing too. We haven't had anything in months. I know her. She's out somewhere spending her evenings with someone else. She can't do without it." Brett picked up his glass, drank the rest of his scotch, banged the glass on the bar, and asked for more. The bartender nodded. Another glass of scotch appeared. Brett's voice began to wheeze. Randy saw Brett swaying slightly on the bar, taking a deep drag. "And she's turned into a real double-barreled bitch. When she talks to me, it's like nails on a chalkboard. Sometimes I feel like a slot machine. She pulls my handle every now and then she grabs the money. It sounds like you have a serious problem, but I don't know how I can help." Brett took a long sip of whiskey. Setting it on the bar, he turned the bar stool around and stared directly into Randy's eyes. Randy saw the dilated pupils and noticed that Brett had to hold onto the edge of the bar to keep his balance. "I want you to seduce my wife." Randy had to catch himself by the arm to hide the astonished look that threatened to appear on his face. He leaned closer to his best friend and supported him with a hand on his shoulder. Randy chalked the remark up to the fact that it was Scotch speaking and not his best friend. "Brett, I think you're pretty damn drunk. Come on, I'll drive you home. You can't drive. I'll pick you up in the morning so you can get your truck." Brett's eyes didn't waver as he raised his glass to toast Randy and drained it. "Okay, buddy, but I'm serious. I want you to seduce my wife and spend the evening with her." "Yes, Brett. We'll talk about it in the morning." Brett's mouth tasted of old sneakers. The light from the window penetrated his skull like a sharp knife through his eyes. Carefully, he got to his feet and waited a moment for the world to stabilize a little before he stumbled toward the shower. A few seconds later, steam came from the shower and hot water poured from the shower head. Gritting his teeth, he stepped under the searing jets. Half an hour later, grabbing a towel, he stepped onto the cold tiles. He felt a little more human. Getting dressed, he decided that a cup of coffee and a small breakfast might make him feel even better. "Damn, I might survive after all." Pat rolled over. She opened one eye and looked at him. "Well, I guess you had a good time last night. Randy had to walk you back to the house." He glanced at her and grimaced. "Yeah, so what? I like staying home alone a hell of a lot." She just stared at him silently, and rolled over onto her back, pulling the blanket up to her ears. Brett dressed haphazardly. While the coffee brewed, he tossed the bread into the toaster. As he poured a cup of black coffee, he heard the toaster hiss. Grabbing a still-hot piece of dark brown bread, he spread butter and jelly on it. Leaning against the counter and watching the coffee drip into the coffee pot, he thought about what stage of his life he was at. He went to work at an oil refinery right out of college. As a junior engineer, he was assigned to the operations department and spent most of his time looking at dials and plotting numbers on a graph. It wasn't difficult and didn't require any effort on his part. He began to study the process he was overseeing and found what he thought was a highly inefficient and costly process. He began doodling on scraps of paper in the control shack where he worked. Those scribbles turned into drawings, and the drawings turned into the genesis of a new management process. When he told management about his idea for a new design that would improve the efficiency of part of the plant, they agreed to allow him to do some testing on his own time and at his own expense. The design paid off. He was given the go-ahead to scale the prototype to a full system in one of the existing plants. Years of work, testing and measurement proved that his design increased plant productivity and significantly reduced costs. He spent the next 2 years traveling around the country modernizing other plants with his improvement. It didn't hurt that he owned the patent, and the company not only paid him to install the changes, but also royalties on every gallon of product processed using his patent. He went from mired in student debt and the most junior engineer in the company to owning his own engineering consulting firm with more money than he could spend. It was on one of his installation trips that he met Pat. Her full name at the time was Patricia Margaret McManus. She was 10 years older than him. Brett found her exotic and beautiful. She was tall and built like a brick house with not a single missing brick. Dark hair, dark eyes, and long legs. He was mesmerized. She worked for the company as a human resources specialist and, in that position, had access to the company's personnel records. That explained how she knew so much about him when he showed up that first day. He remembered it clearly. He arrived at the gate as he had planned. The guard told him to go to the human resources office to get his ID card, which was also the key card that allowed him into the plant. When he entered the HR department, the receptionist directed him directly to Pat's office. She immediately made it clear that she was single, free, and ready to show him everything the city had to offer. He accepted her offer, and over the next 6 weeks they began dating. The night before he was to leave for his next project, she snuggled up to him and cried. The next day, she packed her bags and left with him. 6 months later, they were married. 6 years later, she was still gorgeous. She worked out 3 times a week, did yoga twice a week, and the rest of the days she either played tennis at the club or swam in the pool at her house. The rest of the time, she did her shopping. That the woman knew how to shop was beyond doubt. When he finished the last project, they moved back to where they lived now, and he opened his engineering firm. She immediately decided to build a house. It had to be in the most prestigious neighborhood and be the biggest and grandest. That was 4 years ago. His business was booming. His company was now housed in its own building, employing 15 engineers, and he couldn't even count the number of CAD operators, administrative assistants, and secretaries. All he knew was that he was no longer designing. He spent most of his time in meetings or cozying up with clients. The only respite for him was Randy. Randy graduated from university with a business degree and went on to earn an MBA. He was now working for a large investment firm as a market analyst. According to Randy, he was doing well, but not as well as Brett. They remained best friends and spent a significant amount of time together. He poured a cup of coffee and heard a beep at the front door. It was Randy picking him up to take him to his car to go to the office. He walked out of the house, closed the door behind him, and pressed the button on his key fob to arm the alarm system. Randy looked him over as Brett climbed into the car. "You look like shit." "I feel like shit." Randy laughed. They chatted as Randy drove to the bar. Brett's car wasn't the only one in the parking lot. He got out of the car, and as he closed the door, he stopped and looked around. "Are you going to be here tonight?" "You?" "Yeah, tonight's her spin class night. I hate this big fucking house." "I'll be here. Just don't start without me." Brett nodded and closed the door. Brett was still standing next to the pickup when Randy drove away. Randy pointed the car downtown, toward the office building where the investment company had offices on 5 floors of the bank tower. His office wasn't a corner office, but it did have a whole wall of windows. He wasn't too disappointed with his situation. After getting his MBA, he went to work for the investment company as a broker. His job was to talk clients into investing more money and then keep them happy. He was good at it. So good, in fact, that within a year, he was pulled out of what he called the bullpen and moved into a cubicle along the wall with a computer and a phone. This was his reward for outperforming everyone else. He kept working and discovered that he had a knack for looking at the markets and seeing trends that no one else noticed. This skill allowed him to take early positions in the market and make good profits because of this ability. The guys on the 30th floor noticed him, and he started steadily climbing the floors, starting on the 25th floor. He now had an office with windows on the 30th floor. He wasn't a partner yet. He pulled into the parking lot and took a seat with his name scrawled on the wall. One could always judge his position in the company by how close his parking space was to the elevator. His spot was close, and soon he was on the elevator heading to his office. Randy was already sitting at the bar when Brett showed up. "You're leaving early?" "I flew out a little early. Everything was happening slowly." Randy ordered a Pilsner beer, and Brett ordered one as well, before lowering himself onto the stool next to Randy. "How's it going?" "The firm is growing. Last week we hired 12 new brokers. Our funds have exceeded $2 billion and are growing every day." "Yeah, I heard. You guys are almost doubling the returns that other fund managers get. How the hell do you do that?" "Good planning, good management, and good people." Brett cast a leering glance at Randy. "Okay, I'll accept that answer, but I think there's more to it than that." Randy smiled. "How about engineering?" "Shit, people are flipping us contracts. We developed a new control system for a plastics plant, and now everyone in the industry wants to apply the same technology to their systems. Each one is a little different, with its own problems and challenges. We can't find enough engineers to cover all the projects." They were watching rugby, broadcast by satellite, on a screen above the bar. Brett didn't take his eyes off the screen, but was talking to Randy. "Have you thought about what I asked you last night yet?" "What?" Brett turned his head to look at Randy and found his friend looking at him open-mouthed and incredulous. "About my wife." "You're serious? I thought that was Scotch talking." "No, I've been thinking about it for a while now. I want to curb her other side a little. She needs to be confused, and if I can catch her in a bad position, I can have at least a little influence on her." Randy thought for a moment. "I don't know, Brett. We've been friends for a long time. I'm not sure I want to get involved in your domestic problems. I wouldn't want our friendship to deteriorate." Brett laughed. "I don't think that's going to happen. Look, if I try to divorce her, she'll take half of everything I own. If I don't get her under control, she'll spend it all anyway. I have nothing to lose. If you help me put her in a position where I can at least curb some of her habits, I win, plus you get to spend a nice evening with her." Now it was Randy's turn to laugh. "So, how do you propose to do it?" "I'm going to invite you on Saturday. I'm going to insist she attend since you're coming. Hell, she already likes you. She's always telling me I should be more like Randy, drive a sports car and work in a nice office. She thinks I work at a mechanic store. Anyway, plan to be there all evening. After dinner, we'll watch the game, grill dinner, and eat by the pool. We can go swimming in the evening before you have to leave." "Yes, but how does that help?" "I'll arrange for me to get a call in the middle of dinner to report a problem at one of our facilities. It happens all the time, and she won't suspect a thing. I'll need to go to the office and leave you alone. After that, you will be on your own." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to go to my office and watch a movie on my computer and sleep on the couch." Randy's face was impassive. There was no hint of what he was thinking. His eyes seemed to bore into Brett's for several seconds. "Okay, we'll see how things work out." Saturday came. Pat had been complaining all day about having to stay home on Saturday, until she found out that Randy was coming to spend the afternoon and evening with her. That seemed to make her a little happier. Just after lunch, she showed up upstairs with a swimsuit cover. It was bright green in color. It had a drawstring around her neck, a drawstring on her back, and 2 triangles of fabric. The bottom consisted of a drawstring at the waist and a triangle of fabric. Brett looked at it and just shook his head. Those 6 square inches of material and rope had probably cost him a couple $100. He was preparing the steaks for this evening. While he was putting them in the marinade, she walked through the kitchen. Jesus fucking Christ. She even had lime green stiletto heels to match the suit. He had to admit she looked damn good. If only she wasn't such an idiot. He turned his attention back to her as she stopped in the doorway and almost contemptuously spat out a few words at him. I hope you have better wine. That shit you bought last time was awful. It's in the refrigerator. The guy said it's imported, and for that price it must be good. She looked at him contemptuously. She had an open bottle in her hands. She poured herself a glass and headed for the pool. After a while, he heard Randy at the front door and went to let him in. They chatted as they walked back to what Brett called his man cave. It was supposed to be a playroom. He had remodeled it to be his personal space. An 80-inch flat-screen TV with a state-of-the-art sound system hung on one wall. 4 armchairs stood opposite the screen. Along one wall was a beer tap and a full bar. The other wall consisted mostly of French doors that faced the pool. There was a large awning over the doors that created another space between the doors and the pool for entertainment. Brett, I love this room. I wish I had a room like this. Jesus, Randy, you know that everything I have is yours. You already have the code to the security system and the front door. Come and use it anytime you want. Randy looked at him. He'd heard the offer before, but he'd never accepted it. Taking a glass from the freezer, Randy poured himself a beer from the tap and walked over to the windows, looking out over the pool, across which Pat could be seen lounging in a lounge chair in the sun. She was stunning. Brett, do you still want to carry out your plan? Yes, I'll get a call right after dinner, and I'll leave shortly afterward. You're on your own. Be careful. Randy laughed. I think I can handle it. How do you want me to play? It's up to you. I'll be away until tomorrow morning. I've done this before when customers call with problems, so she won't suspect anything. Send me a message and let me know how things are going. I'll call her around 10 and tell her I'll stay in the office until we get the problem resolved. Randy's attention stayed focused on the view of the pool. They sat at the patio table. The remains of dinner were scattered, and Brett carried the first dishes into the kitchen. Randy noticed that Pat made no move to help, so he got up, gathered his things, and followed Brett. As he was entering the kitchen, the cell phone rang. Brett pulled a cell phone out of his pocket. He talked on the phone as he walked past Randy. Randy followed him outside, listening to one side of the conversation. Okay, I'll go to the office and get the specs and drawings. Give me about 30 minutes and I'll get back to you. Tell them to shut this thing down and don't do anything else until we've checked everything out. He hung up the phone and dropped it back into his pocket. I need to get to the office. One of our clients has a production problem and we have to deal with it to get them back on track. I might be late. Randy, stay as long as you like. The game starts in a couple minutes. The big screen is ready. Pat, keep Randy company and try to make this an enjoyable evening. Randy saw her frown at Brett's remark. He watched as Brett turned away from Pat and winked slyly in her direction. A few minutes later, Randy heard the large pickup truck that Brett was driving rumble down the driveway. He looked over at Pat. She was studying him. I think we should clean this place up. I can watch some of the game before I head home. If you have something to do, I'll do just fine on my own. She looked at the remains of the dirty dishes on the table and waved her hand nonchalantly. Don't worry about it. The maid will come in the morning and clean it up. I'll still sit with you for a few minutes and have another glass of wine. Brett finally did something right with that bottle. She took the bottle and her glass. Randy watched her walk away. He smiled. She wiggled her hips in a deliberately exaggerated way as she walked. He gathered up the last of the dirty dishes and took them to the kitchen, washed them thoroughly, and put them in the sink. Only then did he follow her into the game room and pour himself a cold beer from the tap. She stretched out in one of the chairs. The pre-game show was on. She sat with one leg and foot tucked under her and the other hanging over the arm of the chair. She seemed to be concentrating on the television. She fidgeted in the chair as the pre-game show went on. Are you sure you want to watch this game? Randy was instantly alert. The tone and pitch of her voice were enough to make him take notice. Maybe you want to watch something else? That's fine with me. I'll probably go home after I finish this beer. She started flipping channels and switching between satellite channels until she stopped at one and started looking at the menu. Randy learned that it was a live streaming site where you could select a movie and it would be streamed directly to the TV. He watched her work the remote, not paying much attention to what she was looking for. He turned his back to the screen to grab a beer coaster and set it under his glass. When he turned around, he was surprised to see an amazing picture on the huge screen. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement and saw Pat smiling at him. It's a lot more interesting than that pregame show. Randy glanced at Pat and saw that she was frozen in place, her breathing noticeably quickened. With some effort, he returned his attention to the screen. He couldn't blame Pat for being a little drunk. The woman on the screen was beautiful, and the man, admittedly young, well-built. They were both, well, athletically built. For the next 45 minutes, she and Pat didn't say a word. The movie ended and the screen went dark. The room, dimly lit only by the reflected light from the pool, became quiet. Randy stood up and set the empty beer glass on the bar. I guess I'll be going. She climbed out of her chair and approached him. Brett said, we're all going for a swim. It's getting late, and I really should get going. Since Brett isn't here, I'm not sure I should linger. Good God, Randy, you're Brett's best friend. He won't mind. Let's go for a swim. He shrugged and followed her to the pool. He was wearing swim trunks, and he took off the polo shirt he'd put on over them. He turned as she laid the coverlet on the chaise lounge next to him, and then, to his amazement, she did something. She saw the look on his face and smiled. You pay almost $200 for a swimsuit and you think you have to swim in it too, but it's not. She walked over to the pool and dove into the water. She surfaced on the surface of the pool, tossing her hair back and dousing her head with a stream of water. Her smile was eloquent. Well, come on. He walked over to the pool and dove into the water, surfacing a few feet away. That's nice. It's probably the best thing about this house. He listened as she complained about the house, the layout, the flaws, and what she would have done differently. At one point, he asked her a question. Didn't you design this house? Oh, yes. But now that I'm living in it, I know what I'd do differently. But Brett absolutely refuses to sell this one and build another. She turned and swam toward the pool. He leaned against the edge and leaned back, resting his elbows on the side of the pool, watching her. She executed a perfect turn and then headed in his direction. She stopped next to him and stood up. The water was shallower where he stood. Aren't you going swimming? I'm fine. It's nice just being in the water. She took a step toward him and stopped a few centimeters away from him. You and Brett have been friends for most of your lives, haven't you? Yes, we grew up together, more like brothers than friends. Her eyes were fixed on him. He told me that you shared everything when you were in high school and college. Yes, we were close enough in size that we traded clothes. We shared a dorm room in college, and everything I had belonged to Brett, and everything Brett had belonged to me. I heard Brett say that too. I think he'd like it if you came more often and lingered here. Yes, I think it bothers him that I don't come here more often and use the pool and game room. He wants you around. You're his only friend. I feel the same way about him. She stepped closer. Brett won't mind. Remember what he said. What belongs to him belongs to you. He had no doubts about what she was saying. He didn't need to be seduced by anyone. Instead, he was being seduced. Brett would drop his jaw when he found out. Just as she was almost seducing him, the phone rang. She frowned and looked at the table. Shit, that's probably Brett. Give me a minute. He watched her walk across the deck and answer the phone. Hey? All night? What time tomorrow? This late? Okay, I'll tell him. She walked back to the pool, down the steps, and back to the same spot she had just left. Brett says to stay as long as you want. He's going to be out all night and probably won't be back until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. I think I'd better go home. She stepped back, finding herself in front of him. Stay a while. There's still wine left in the bottle. We can watch another movie. He looked down at her. I don't know. She looked at him and grinned slyly. I think you know. I think you're going to stay for a while. He put his hands on her waist, pulled her to him and kissed her. Shit, he chuckled. Let's go. She started to turn away. He reached out, took her wrist, and pulled her to him. She'd seen a faint amusement before, as if there was some unspoken joke in them that she hadn't realized. It was a look she'd never seen before. It was confident. Randy seemed to have changed, and it made her stop. "No, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it on my terms. You are not in charge, I am. Do you understand?" She was out of her depth right now. Men didn't talk to her like this. They were always awed by her beauty and fawned over her, thinking they had a chance with her. Men didn't make demands of her. It was she who made demands of them. The unexpected change of scenery made her react instinctively rather than with her usual self-control. "Yes, sir. That's better. There are a few rules. Listen carefully. You make no rules or demands. You will do what I say without question or hesitation. If you ever talk back to me or doubt my words, one of two things will happen. I'll either make things worse for you, or I'll walk away. And this ends right now." She nodded silently. Still not recovered, there was nothing more she could do. "Do you understand?" She nodded again. He spoke more harshly to her. "I asked you a question. When I ask you a question, you will answer me. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good girl. We're going to get out of the pool now and go to the playroom. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." He pushed her away as he walked past her to the steps leading up from the pool, and without turning around, he heard her following. He walked over to the chair and sat down, ignoring the pool water he'd left on the floor that now spread across the rich leather of the chair. She was standing right behind him. There was unfortunately a moment here that I had to cut out due to YouTube, but I'm always happy to remind you that the 7-day free version is always available on our Patreon. At the link in the description, there's also a huge amount of stories there that you're likely to like a lot, so be sure to join our exclusive community. He heard her whimpering behind him. "You're not going to leave? You're not going to keep watching movies?" He turned and looked at her. "Not today. I told you it's on my terms, not yours." She stood up. Her eyes blazed with fire, and she spat at him. "You arrogant ass." Without thinking, he slapped her so hard that she fell to the cross. Her hand reached for her cheek, which was already bright red and stinging like fire. Her eyes filled with shock. "Don't ever talk to me like that again, you fool. If you want a continuation, then when your husband comes home, you will greet him at the front door just as you do now, and make him just as pleased before he takes another step into the house. When he tells me how you greeted him, then I'll consider continuing our weekend. Is that clear?" She still maintained a surprised look on her face as she replied in a rather meek voice, "Yes, sir." As he was driving home, he called Brett. "It's me." "Hey, how are you? I'm on my way home now." "Already? What went wrong?" "Nothing. I just wanted to tell you that your wife jumped me in the pool. She made it clear right away that she thought your comment about yours is mine, and mine is yours applied to her as well." "Holy shit, that little weasel." "Yes. But you should have seen her face when she took the first step on her own." Brett laughed. "Yes, horse. This isn't the first time you've seen that look. Anyway, the bottom line is this. I got her to do something for me, and then I left." "Why?" "I gave her some instructions and told her that if she didn't follow them exactly, she wouldn't get a chance to get a sequel." "What did you tell her to do?" "You'll know when you get home. Oh, no matter what happens, no matter how much she begs or what she offers to sleep apart from her tonight." "Ugh, okay. Maybe I should go home." "Yes. Call her and tell her the problem is solved, and you're coming home early." "All right, buddy. Thanks for the heads up. No problem. Let me know how things work out. I'll go home and go to bed. Don't call until at least noon." Brett hung up the phone and sat thinking for a minute. Randy obviously had some kind of plan. I wonder how many other lovers this fool has had in the last couple years of yoga and spin class. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. "Pat, is Randy still there?" "Already? Well, we solved the problem and I'm going home early. I was hoping Randy was still there. I'll be home in about 30 minutes. He hung up the phone. As he headed for his car, he pondered exactly what Randy had told her to do. He walked through the door into the back room. To his surprise, she was waiting for him just outside the door. As soon as he closed the door, she followed Randy's orders. He stood there in amazement. She had accomplished her mission, and looked up at him smiling. "Welcome home, I guess. What the hell caused this? I just thought I'd give you a little surprise." "That's the way it was. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep on the couch." There was a slight panic in her eyes. "Don't you want to lie next to me in the same bed?" "After a gift like that, I don't think so." He walked past her, leaving her in the back room. He smiled. The next day was Sunday afternoon. He got up early, walked down the stairs, and swam a bit before making coffee. While waiting for the coffee, he contemplated what to do that day. On Sundays, she usually slept in until noon, so he was on his own. The golf course was always an attractive option. He could play around early and then have lunch at the clubhouse. He wouldn't be able to call Randy until late afternoon anyway. When he got home, it was almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He looked into the bedroom. As he expected, she was still lying curled up on the bed, dead to the world. He put together a huge sandwich. Taking the sandwich and a beer, he headed for the pool table. He called Randy. "Good morning." "Hey, Brett, what are you doing?" "I played a round of golf early this morning. How about you?" "I got a good night's sleep and just took a shower. How did it go last night?" Brett recounted the incident in detail. Randy laughed. "She followed the instructions exactly. I don't know what you're up to, but I'm immensely grateful to you. It was the best gift I've ever gotten in my life. Please, why don't I come over and we'll watch the game this afternoon?" "Sounds like a plan. I'll be there around 3. "Cool. Bring your swim trunks if you don't wear them. I'm sure we'll end up in the pool." "I will. Is there anything I can pick up?" "No, we're fine here. I plan to grill fish later." "Sounds great. I'll see you in a little while." The phone went silent, and Brett smiled. He couldn't wait to see her reaction when Randy arrived. Brett heard Randy pushing the buttons to unlock the front door. It was the first time Randy had ever used a code. He entered the game room where Brett was sitting. "Good afternoon. How are you?" "Watching pre-game. I may have screwed up. The over-under odds on this game have gone crazy. I made a bet early in the morning and I think I'm on the wrong side of it." "How much?" "Grand." Randy shrugged. "It's part of the game if you're going to gamble." A sigh sounded behind them, and both men turned to see Pat standing in the doorway in the light of the lantern behind her back in a negligee. The light behind her left no chance for imagination. "Randy, I didn't know you were here." She turned and ran back up the stairs. Brett snorted. It was priceless. Randy grinned and settled back in his chair. By the time Pat returned, the game had already started, and both men were absorbed in what was happening. She walked quietly behind the chairs and stood still for a moment. "Are you going to be here all day?" Randy tilted his head and looked over the back of the chair. "Yeah. Brett took me out to dinner again. We're going to watch this game and the late game from the West Coast." Randy saw that she smiled slightly. "I think I'll take a swim." Randy turned to look at her. "Before you go, pour me another beer." She stopped and looked at him. Brett was expecting a snide remark or the usual, "take it yourself." He almost fell out of his chair when he heard her reply. "Yes, sir." He watched incredulously as she filled a glass from the faucet and carefully brought it over to Randy. As she approached, Randy turned to Brett. "Do you want some?" "Of course." Randy spoke without looking at her. "Get your husband a beer." It was then that Brett heard what he expected to hear. "He can get his own. He lives here. He's not a guest." Randy escorted her with a glance as she turned and left the room. "She's feisty. She's always been like this. We've got to change that." "How?" "I'll teach you." Brett looked at him with a question in his eyes. "Just be patient." Brett shrugged. He had nothing to lose. On her way to the pool, Pat didn't fail to pass through the game room. She could have come straight out of the bedroom. Brett suspected she wanted to make sure Randy saw her. The men engrossed in the game paid no attention to her. When the game was over, Brett and Randy fired up the grill and started cooking the fish. Brett went to make the salad, and Randy took care of the fish and vegetables. Seeing an opportune moment, Pat moved closer and seemed to study the food on the grill. "I did what you told me to do." "I heard." "What now? When can I see you again?" "What do you have in store for Tuesday night?" "I teach a couple spinning classes at the gym." "Cancel them and be at my house at 6 p.m. Make up excuses that you'll be late. I don't care what they are. You won't be home before midnight." He saw her flinch and then nod. She was back at the pool when Brett came out with the salad. A few minutes later, they were sitting down to eat. On Monday morning, Randy called Brett. Hey, how's the financial world going?" "Everything's perfectly fine this morning. We made a hell of a lot of money." "How the hell do you make money if the markets are going down?" "We sold a bunch of stuff Friday afternoon and are now buying again. I'm sure by Wednesday, the markets will go on a rebound, and we'll almost double what we took out and put back in." "Shit, how the hell can you predict that?" "I have no idea. I can only read it into the numbers. How is the engineering business?" "Our customers can ruin an iron anvil with a rubber mallet. Their stupidity is money in my pocket. I'm sending 2 engineers to Milwaukee to take care of the problem." Randy laughed. "At least you don't have to go anymore." "Truth." "Brett, listen. Pat's going to make excuses for Tuesday night." "Why?" "She's leading a spin class that night. She'll be late home and make excuses that she has to do something at the gym. Don't make a big deal out of it." "Shit. I'm never doing this again. What's going on?" "She's coming to my house." Brett lifted his head. "Really?" "Yes." "Good. I just wanted you to know. I don't want you to think I'm doing anything behind your back." "I appreciate it, but I asked you to do this." "I know. I think we can solve a lot of your problems. Just let me work on it." "Whatever it takes." "Okay, I'll talk to you in a couple days." Sure enough, that same day in the afternoon, Pat called. "Brett, I just got word from the gym that I'll have to work late on Tuesday. The girl who runs the 2 late-night spinning classes is sick, and I'll have to take her class." "Why are you doing this shit? It's not like you have to work." "I know, but if you want me to keep looking like this, I'm going to have to work on it." "Okay, what time are you coming over?" "It won't be until midnight." "Okay, I'll probably be in bed. Try not to wake me up." "Well, aren't you a romantic?" She hung up the phone and he put his own down. On Tuesday evening, Pat stopped in front of Randy's house. She had never been there and didn't know what to expect. He gave her the address and the GPS led her to a remote lot. It was in a rural part of the county, well outside of town, isolated and hidden from the road by trees. It was one of those dilapidated flat-roofed houses from the 1960s era, with lots of glass and different levels. She noticed that the building was large and seemed to grow out of the rock ledge it sat on. She rang the bell and the intercom next to the door buzzed. "Come in. The door is open." In the foyer, she saw hallways leading left and right. She had an unobstructed view from the front door to the glass wall that was the back of the house. There were steps descending from the foyer into the huge living room. She slowly walked forward. She saw that the house stood on top of a sheer cliff overlooking the valley below. The view was magnificent. An unusual noise for a house drew her attention to a small stream running from under the edge of the concrete slab that made up the floor. It gurgled and splashed along one side of the spacious room before disappearing through an opening in the living room. Following its course, she saw it reappear on the slope behind the house. Randy appeared from the kitchen to her right. In his hand, he held a glass carelessly. "I see you found me." "Randy, it's so beautiful. I didn't realize you had a place like this." "It's just a little cabin in the woods." She rolled her eyes. "Just a hovel?" "Okay, maybe it's not really a cabin. It was designed by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. You can see a lot of his influence in it. When I bought it, the previous owners were going to bulldoze it down. I restored it from the foundation up. I love it." Her gaze stopped at the gleaming kitchen and the elegant but simple furnishings of the house. "I may have underestimated Randy a little bit." She smiled slyly at him. "So now what?" "What do you mean?" "Well, I figured I'd get a chance to continue what I started." A wide grin lit up her face. He set the glass on the counter and slowly walked over to her and did something. "I told you that everything we do is on my terms. You will not address me in such a brash tone. You will address me as Sir. Understood?" Tears stood in her eyes. Her voice shook when she answered. "Yes, sir." She pulled back slightly. His eyes played up and down on her. She could hardly understand that look. Usually men looked at her differently. In Randy's eyes, she saw a hard, almost cynical expression. She got the impression that he looked at her more as prey than as a prize. "When you are in this house, you will be in a special state, unless I tell you otherwise." He turned to the counter and picked up the glass. When he looked at her again, she stood in a state of mild shock. She watched as he shook his head and set the glass back on the counter. Taking her hand, he led her across the room to one of several couches and chairs arranged in groups. She turned her head toward him, still stunned and a little confused. She saw him reach for his belt and realized what he was about to do. She raised herself up to protest, but he immediately stopped her. She was sobbing and crying. "I won't tell you twice what you need to do. If you don't do what I say the moment I say it, it will pale in comparison to what you will get. You have a choice to make right now. Either you agree, or you walk out of here right now. Do you hear me?" She stuttered. "Yes, sir. Now. I want you to fulfill my past wish when I turn around." He nudged her lightly, returning to his drink. She leaned back against the couch. By the time he saw her again, she had already gotten her wish. She straightened up and looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and her eyes red. "That's better. Now follow me." He headed down the long hallway. She followed him quickly. Turning in the doorway, she found herself in a huge bedroom with one wall of windows that offered the same view as the living room. What the hell? Why am I not running like hell to get out of this maniac's house? "Lie down over there." He disappeared into the bathroom. She heard him go to the bathroom, not bothering to close the bathroom door. She spun around and almost jogged to the spot he had pointed out to her. Her mind was a jumble of conflicting emotions. "I have to leave. Right now. Shit. I don't want to leave. What is it about him that makes me act like this? I should be in charge. He has to beg me. Oh my God. He came out of the bathroom. Well, you seem to be a fast learner if you're properly motivated." Here we come to the end of the first part of our story. What have we learned? We have met two bosom buddies, Brett and Randy, whose strong male friendship seems unbreakable. But beneath the surface of this perfect picture, there are deep cracks. Brett, a successful engineer, seems to be drowning in routine and family problems. His wife, Pat, a woman with a strong character and extravagant tastes, is becoming an increasing challenge for him. Behind the external facade of success and stability, Brett hides growing dissatisfaction with his life. His revelations to Randy reveal a deep wound in his soul. He feels cheated, used, and unhappy in his marriage. His confession of wanting his friend to seduce his wife is shocking, but at the same time sheds light on the despair he is in. Randy, on the other hand, is not without his own problems. A successful financier, he hides his true desires and ambitions under the guise of loyalty to his friend. His reaction to Brett's request raises many questions. Will he really just fulfill his friend's request, or does he have his own hidden motives? We are on the verge of a dangerous game where the stakes are incredibly high. Friendship, loyalty, the desire for revenge, all these feelings are mixed into one dangerous cocktail. What will happen next? Will Brett and Randy be able to maintain their friendship, or will it collapse under the weight of the trials? And what awaits Pat? Will she become a victim, or perhaps be stronger than she seems? You will find the answers to these questions in the second part of our story. Don't miss it. In the meantime, you can enjoy the full version of this exciting story on our Patreon. There you will find even more intrigue, passion, and unexpected plot twists. Subscribe to our channel, like and share your impressions in the comments. Your opinion is very important to me. To be continued.